In this Overnight Edge, we're going to be discussing something very important, and that is how to report your tax-free tips for 2025 and beyond. In this video, we're going to be discussing several items that are going to apply directly to you. We're going to discuss what are qualified tips, how the self-employed qualify, or do the self-employed qualify. You'll find out shortly. What jobs qualify, how to report it, or how you're going to report these tips in 2026 and later years, but most importantly for right now, what's up with 2025? How are you going to report your tax-free tips in 2025? That's what you're going to learn. So let's roll along. Let's discuss what tips qualify. What are qualified tips? These are voluntary remittances to the taxpayer that exceed the price of the product or service. It can take the form of cash equivalents. That would be like a debit card, credit card. Items easily converted to cash also qualify as tips. Let's say, for example, a gift card for a certain amount of money for somewhere. That's a qualified tips. In other words, tips are what we consider tips. Qualified tips are tips. All right, what about the self-employed? Now, this is very important just because many occupations that are 1099 or being self-employed, you regularly receive tips. Here's a few examples. Hairstylists, barbers, nail techs, massage therapists, a lot of people in the gig economy, such as Uber and DoorDash drivers, also regularly receive tips. It's a lot of your income. Can you deduct these tips? And the answer is yes, you can deduct these tips. So that's very good news. However, you're going to have a qualifying occupation, and also you're going to have to be able to prove what amount of your income was tips versus non-tips. That's very important. A lot of this is up to you. There's going to be a little reporting we'll go over here in a few minutes, but a lot of this is going to be up to you to record your qualified tips and most importantly be able to prove them. All right, so what occupations qualify? Qualifying occupations are only, because according to the law, only occupations that customarily and regularly receive tips on or before December 31st, 2024. The reason they said that was because they didn't want everybody all of a sudden saying, oh, look, I'm an attorney, I get a bunch of tips. Oh, boy, I'm a doctor, I get a bunch of tips. Only occupations that were receiving tips before 2024, December 31st, 2024 qualify. That's why we have the proposed regs that list 8 industries and 68 occupations that qualify for tips. Here's your qualifying industries. Okay, we're going to go over these. I'm going to read these, and I'm going to show you the jobs and within each industry, and I'm going to take I'll just take like a second on each one so you can pause it to see if your job qualifies. You got the beverage and food service, entertainment and events, hospitality and guest services, 400s are home services, personnel services, personal appearance and wellness, recreation and instruction, transportation and delivery. So what you're going to notice here, you see these codes, the 100s, 200s, 300s, etc. These are very important because you're going to need them to get the deduction, primarily if you're an employee or an employer in 2026 and beyond. You're going to need to know these codes. All right, here are the various jobs or occupations within each industry. Here's your beverage and food, entertainment and events, hospitality and guest services, home services, personal services. You see there's quite a few of those. Personal appearance and wellness, a lot. I'll pause for 1 second. Recreation and instruction, and then finally transportation and delivery. You see there's a lot of jobs there that are going to qualify for the no tax on tips or the tips deduction. All right, so how are employees going to report tips in 2026? I'm going to jump a year, 2026 and beyond. Well, it's going to be fairly easy after 2025. At the end of 2026, the employers are going to report on your W-2s. You get a new box on the W-2s. That's box 14B, Treasury Tips Occupational Code. Remember those codes? They're going to go on your W-2. You're also going to have a new code in box 12, which is called as TP for qualified tips. I don't know why they don't have QP, but it's TP for qualified tips. It's going to be in box 12. And then we also have a brand new schedule. It's going to attach to your tax return. That's Schedule 1A, and we are going to complete Part 2 for the tips. Here's what your 2026 W-2, this is the draft, probably look very similar to this. You'll notice here in box 14B, there's your Treasury Tips Occupational Code. That's where those will be reported, or the code. And then the amount will be reported somewhere in box 12 there. Will be the TP. That's what you're going to report them. All right, then you got Schedule 1A. Here's what Schedule A looks like. This is for 2025 now. We're going to have this starting in 2025. This is what Part 2 looks like. If you want to go down your line by lines, you can check it out. All right, so how about 2025? 2025, I got to tell you, right up is going to be a mess. So 2025, basically, employees, you're kind of on your own with reporting your tip income. Employers are not required to report tips separately, and there's no place on really on the W-2 form that they have to report the tips. So how do employees report for 2025? Basically, you're going to have 4 options. Okay, let's go over each of the 4 options. You can use, if you're an employee, you can use the Social Security tips amount reported in box 7. That's Social Security tips reported in box 7 of your W-2. You want to back up to that W-2 for 2026, you can see what that's going to look like. It's box 7. You can use that. Or if you report tips to your employer, using form 4070, employees report of tips to employer, or some type of similar report that you give to your employer each month or each week, or however you might do that in your particular job, you can keep a copy of those and total them up for the year as proof for your tip deductions. And if employers want to be nice and they know what your qualified tips are for the year, you can use box 14 of the WW2. They can just put the code TP in there or tips, something like that. So in box 14, that's kind of a catch-all box on the W2. They can stick them in there if they want to be nice, and then you will know, and you'll have proof because the employer told you that. So it'll help back you up with the IRS too if you need to. All right, so option 4 is the employee can include a mass report on 2025's Form 4137. This is Social Security and Medicare tax of unreported tip income. This is also used to report allocated tips in box 8 of your W-2. I believe you can add that to either one of these items, the first 3, because these are usually reported separately, so you would add that to the amount of your qualified tips. Let's go through an example that the IRS gave us in their guidance. All right, so Billy's a bartender. During 2025, he reported $20,000 in tips on Form 4070. He turned those into his employer, and I got a little smiley face there because, yeah, Billy did that. But anyways, I digress. He received these cash tips, and he reported them directly to his employer because he's a good employee. All right, so he's got $20,000 on 4070. However, box 7 of his W-2 for Social Security tips lists $15,000 on there. It doesn't match what he reported to his employer. Also, he has $4,000 of unreported tips on Form 4137 now is attached to his 1040. Probably most likely for allocated tips, but it can be other tips as well. So what can he do? All right, he can either use the $20,000 that he reported to his employer on Form 4170 plus the $4,000 on the 4137 that's attached to him 1040, so he gets $25,000 deduction. Or, I don't even know why he put this in there because it's kind of a no-brainer if you do the math. He can use the $15,000 on box 7 plus the total of his Form 4137 for $4,000, totaling $19,000. If you were Billy, which would you use? I asked you this. Okay, so let's jump forward to qualifying tips for the self-employed. As we said earlier, you can deduct them. It cannot exceed your business profit. You can report your income on Schedule C, which is sole proprietor's tax return, attaches to your 1040. You can report these tips just like an employee on Schedule 1A, Part 2, which we went over earlier. You're going to deduct these. They're deducted from taxable income. Does not reduce your self-employment tax. So your self-employment tax is really equal to Social Security and Medicare that you would pay if you were an employee. I'm sorry. So it doesn't reduce that. It just reduces your income tax. This is the most important item to get these for self-employed individuals. You got to be able to prove your occupation qualifies for tax-free tips. And then also you got to be able to prove your tip amount. This is vitally important. All right, so let's look at 2026 and beyond, then we'll jump back to 2025. It's going to be a little easier even for the self-employeds because basically you got to prove you're working a qualified occupation. However, we don't know how this is going to work out yet. But as far as we understand it, your 1099s, that's your 1099 non-employee compensation, 1099 miscellaneous, and your 1099K that you get as being self-employed. If you take credit card or debit card payments, that 1099K you get at the end of the year, they're supposed to report qualified tips starting in 2026. How are they going to do that? I have no idea, but we're going to need some more bureaucracy. Yay. But anyways, I digress. So, most importantly, you're going to need to keep a log or other records to track your qualified tips. Keep the records for at least 3 years because it's up to you to prove your qualified tips. The way I understand it right now we're jumping forward to 2026. If you have the 1099s that tell you the amount of tips that you received, and also you have other records for cash tips, I'm 90% certain that those cash tips can be added to whatever's on those 1099s. 99% certain. We're not there yet. Let's jump to 2025. Back to 2025. All right, so what are you going to do if you're self-employed this year for 2025? You're going to have to prove you're working a qualified occupation. We know that. There's going to be no 1099 tip reporting. So you're on your own, just like the employees are for this year. Very important that you keep some kind of log. I'd start right now, go back, find out how many tips you received, because you may have to go through all your receipts to see what tips you received. You might have to see how fairly paid your tips. Now, if you're working for Uber or something like that, they're probably going to have a really nice report for you because they're going to be able to track all that. But if you're on your own like a hairstylist, you're probably doing that a lot yourself. So it's up to you to track these records. Keep these records for at least 3 years. And as I said, get to work, find out what they are now. So you can do it. Okay. Self-employed example given in the IRS guidance. Let's say Jane's a travel guide. Jane received $7,000 in tips, credit card payments, right? They're using that example with just credit card payments. The example does not show tips. That's why I'm speculating a little bit on cash tips being allowed in future years, but we'll see how that plays out. There's no separate 1099 reporting for tips for 2025. However, Jane is very detailed, and she keeps a daily log showing the tips that she received, the date she received them, and the customer's name. All right, that's a lot of detail to track to prove you have tips. But because she has that log and she can prove she's in the occupation, and also she can prove the amount, she gets the $7,000 qualified tip deduction. So that was it for tips. As we wind this up, hey, you guys got a question? You got a comment? Leave it below. We'll try to get to you, or somebody else, another really nice viewer or a nice subscriber to our website or our YouTube page, I should say, will answer that question for you. Also, check out our playlist for more tax and business tips. So cut those taxes, grow that business. And if you're really interested in taking a deep dive, check out overnightaccountant.com. Look at our course offerings. I'm sure we'll have something on there that'll help you cut your taxes or grow your business.